Hello and welcome to another edition of the Osceola's Reeling Them In Recruiting Report. My name is Pat Burnham, and I will be joined today by Osceola recruiting analyst Charles Fishbein and Rivals national recruiting analyst Ryan Wright. Well, guys, thanks for joining us today. Ryan, we've been looking forward to having you on since Osceola signed up with Rivals, and now that Florida State's at the end of camp and some of our focus switches back to recruiting, just want to get you and Fish back on as obviously recruiting will ramp back up with the coaches starting to hit the road to watch games in September. Critical year for Florida State in the third year of Mike Norvell's tenure here in Tallahassee. And Ryan, I'm going to start with you. What is the importance of this season as it impacts the 14 kids that Florida State already has committed for 2023 and the kids that they are trying to get to the finish line with?
I think every season is important to have a winning season. I'm sure FSU and their fans wanted one last year. I think I don't want to steal Fish's thunder here, but I think he may have projected them at 7-5, which would be that improvement. I think it's important for them to compete in the Atlantic, even if they're a game or two behind Clemson. Hopefully for the fans, that's not the case. But I do think it's important. I know they play Florida, Miami every year, but that's a momentum opportunity within the state for recruiting. So anything 6 wins and above is a show of a sign of improvement. But for me, I really think if they can get in that 8-win level, 9-win, or even be really competitive in some of these games that maybe they're not expected to, I think it's going to be a big difference maker. It's showing the future and the progress there in Tallahassee.
Fish, I've talked about this probably each of the last two seasons, but just get your thoughts on the importance of this season as it affects this recruiting class.
Well, I mean, you know this as well as I do. Florida State had a lot of success for 20, 30 years. So the fan base and the people around the program aren't used to losing. Every team has that downturn, whether they want it or not. They were fortunate to have two coaches that won a lot of ball games for a long time. And this is FSU's downturn. Now they got to turn it around, and they're not used to that rebuild. So now they're going into a season where, like Ryan said, 7 wins. It's like people say, "Oh, well, 7 wins wouldn't be enough." Well, there is a process to this in this rebuild, and 7-5 would be a 2-game improvement. I think the players that they're recruiting will see that. 8 wins would probably be the ceiling. I personally feel. I know some feel that this team has 9 wins, but for them to get to 9 wins and have a great recruiting class, everything has to go right. They have to stay healthy because guys like Jordan Travis, once he steps off the field, there's a drop off there at the quarterback position. So they need that success, but I also feel like they're doing a good job in recruiting. They just need a couple breaks here and there, and I think that'll happen if they get to 7 or 8 wins this year.
Well, I know we were going to talk a little bit about the individual commitments on offense here a little bit further down in the show, but to your point, FSU has got 14 commitments, 8 on defense, 6 on offense so far for 2023. Give me just your general thoughts on the class as it stands right now, Fish, and just how you think they've done so far. Then we'll talk about the offensive guys a little bit more in detail.
You and I have had a bunch of conversations about this. Games are won and lost in the trenches. And the one thing Florida State hasn't done well the last, it seems like forever, is recruit the offensive line. They had a good recruiting class last year. Bringing in Lucas Simmons and Roderick Kearney this year, they probably got 2 of the best offensive linemen in this year in the state of Florida. That's a big plus. And both of those guys are guys that can contribute by year 2. They're not, Simmons is more of a project, but you see the potential. And I think a year in a college weight program, a year with college coaching, that in year 2, he's someone that could step in and play that left tackle position, which they've so sorely needed. They've had a lot of guards play out there, but they don't have a traditional 6'7", 6'8", long athletic kid like Simmons playing out there. Kearney's just, I think, the best offensive lineman in the state. I know you like him a lot. He's ready-made. He's a kid that has that mean streak. He gets after it. He gets on a defender, and he finishes. Most high school guys, and I think Ryan will probably agree with this, is that most high school guys, Pat, is that they are taught big guys are taught their whole life, don't hurt that guy, don't hurt that guy. So a lot of these guys in high school, they're a little soft, and it's just the nature of how they are been brought up. So it takes time to get that aggressive style out of these guys. And usually you don't see it till college. Most of them are just so much bigger than somebody in high school that they dominate them because of the size.
Hey, Ryan, just first of all, just your thoughts on the overall progress of this class with 14 commitments. And then as Fish has already gone into some detail on Simmons and Kearney, just your thoughts on those two players.
Yeah, the overall class is coming together. I would agree on the points with Roderick. Just a tremendous run blocker, finishes, athletic. He can pull. He obviously, like what you guys were just talking about, maybe not big enough to play offensive tackle at the next level, but has all the other attributes other than size. I do think Lucas Simmons is a couple 2-year project, getting him in and getting him certainly in the weight room and acclimated to evolving and fine-tuning his skills, especially with his pass pro. On the overall, I think I remember, so Florida State, I believe, is ranked 30th right now in the Rivals teams rankings. Miami's at 11, Miami's at 11, Florida's at number 8. And then I think UCF is behind Florida State. So on the whole, I do think that there's a couple of players that Florida State has already that 5-7 kind of on the tier of a 4-star, with a strong senior season. I think some of those guys are going to move up, which makes this class even stronger, to my point, where it is right now. So I can see that happening and being a difference maker. Overall, I think it's really good. I really like the 2 defensive ends that they have, Lamont Green and Keldrick Falk. Putting those 2 guys together, I know, I think Green may be a little undersized, but he's definitely kind of that Tasmanian devil, if you will, off the edge, that can bring a lot with them. And we'll get into the offensive guys later, but so that's kind of a quick thing. I think Florida State's kind of right there. They may have a couple more 4-stars already, in this class. And, we'll see if they can add some more this fall going into the early signing period.
Fish, throw this one back to you. They're at 14 commitments right now, 13 high school prospects and 1 JUCO prospects. That gives them, by my count, 11 schollies or initials to get through between December and February. How do you see those being split between high school and JUCO kids and portal guys entering the portal?
First off, I wanted to go back quickly with the whole ranking thing. Pat and you'll probably agree with me on this. I'm more about balanced class. Like if they fill every need, quarterback down to DB, that's more important than a lot of times you'll have a class that has high rankings and there's spots where they didn't recruit anybody at that position and the class is overrated and people overlook balanced classes. But as far as where the rest of their class is coming, I don't think they're on that many kids that are left. I mean, there's probably about 4 or 5, maybe up to 6 guys from the high school level. And this staff has proven they like to go into the transfer portal. They have 1 D tackle or D end already committed from the JUCO ranks. I know talking to one of my guys that does JUCO and transfers that they are looking at 2 or 3 other JUCO kids. So they'll probably have, I'd say maybe 5, 6 more high school kids, and then the rest I think will be transfers and JUCO kids.
What Ryan, what are your thoughts on as far as allocation of scholarships, high school to transfer portal for the remaining spots on Florida State's roster?
Well, more for the overall, I think that's what we're going to see on the national level for the fans to kind of get used to that. So the transfer portal has completely changed the landscape. So in one hand, it's good. Other hand, it's bad. It's good for college teams that may miss out because you can get a guy that's been in a collegiate setting for a year or 2, knows he has to go to class, knows he has to get up early to go to weight training and that sort of stuff. There's a maturity factor, not just mentally, but physically. So I think that gives an opportunity if one almost kind of looks at it as like getting a JUCO guy. but maybe already there a little bit more scholastically. It's one less thing you kind of have to worry about bringing a kid along, make sure that he's meeting with his tutors and going to class and stuff like that. A lot of people overlook that when it comes time to bringing a kid into a program with all the things they have to adjust to. But yeah, I mean, just for Florida State or any program, I think that's the way of the world now. And if there's an opportunity to bring a kid in to, as Fish was just saying, to fill immediate needs, that's a good thing. High school kids may not think that because, you know, there's far less that will be taken if they're not high on the board, but chances are they wouldn't be taken anyway. So it's going to be interesting to see how Florida State does everything.
Well, I do want to, you know, we know that the big games, the games against Florida, Miami, always do have ripple effects in recruiting. But with Florida having a first-year head coach in Billy Napier, and obviously Miami bringing back Mario Cristobal home to South Florida, Fish, do these games have any added significance with Florida State being in year 3 with its coach and those two programs being in year 1 with theirs?
I'm going to go back to one game in particular. I always remember Jimbo's first year. They played Florida. Florida had pretty much dominated the series for 3 or 4 or 5 years with Tebow and that group. And I was in the locker room after the game with Timmy Jernigan. I always remember Timmy Jernigan was a lean towards Florida. FSU won that game, and it was like he was part of that team in that locker room. I knew right then and there, watching him celebrate with the team in the locker room, that, all right, this game meant something to Timmy Jernigan, and he ended up committing to FSU later on National Signing Day. So, yeah, the importance of this game. I think the Miami game's a little different because I don't think, you know, that Florida State-Florida rivalry is totally different than the Miami rivalry. The Miami rivalry, they go after certain kids down in South Florida, but that Florida State game means a lot, especially for a lot of those kids in Northern Florida.
Yeah. Well, I think it's going to be fascinating to see how the season plays out, particularly in those games. But as you said, it can be a game changer. But just want to get your thoughts. Ryan, do you have any thoughts on the head-to-head matchups and what that could do in the recruiting process for this year?
I'd probably just reiterate what Fish said. I think that they're both important. And it goes back to what I said earlier. Any win, especially head-to-head in state with recruits that they may have gone after, if you start looking at potential flips, especially any sign of improvement can help with the recruiting process. So I do think that they're all important, putting one ahead of the other. If Florida State could beat Miami within the ACC and have a little bit better conference rating, to me, I maybe put a little bit more of a balance on that. But like Fish said, they don't necessarily go into South Florida that much. So maybe they're competing more against, kids, Central Florida, North Florida. So the Florida battle recruiting wise may mean more, but I do think having a higher placement within the ACC coming the end of the season looks better on the national scale. And Florida being in the SEC, I think that would be a feather in the cap win. So yeah. It's just me, but yeah, I mean, it's all important. I kind of said the same thing all the way around, but they're both very important, I think, maybe for different reasons. And hopefully it kind of illustrated that.
Yeah, thanks. All right, so guys, we want to get into a little bit of your thoughts on each of the offensive commitments. We've talked about Lucas Simmons, and I agree with exactly what you said, Ryan. I think he's probably a guy that's 2 years away once he gets on campus. But to Fish's point, tremendous feet, moves very well. I think the transition competition wise, well, obviously he plays at a smaller school there in Clearwater. I think, we'll see how that impacts his development, but I agree with exactly what you guys said about Roderick Kearney. My notes, well-built physical football player who finishes blocks. So I have no more to say about that other than you guys cleaned it up very nicely. So Fish, I'll ask you this. We've seen Christopher Otto. We've talked to Christopher Otto down there in Key West. how many spots do you think Florida State will have for more offensive linemen in this group? Particularly, they had a great year last year from everything we've seen from this young group of 2022s through fall camp. Looks like they got a chance to hit big with that offensive line class, barring injury. What do you think about as far as numbers for this class?
I think offensive line, and we've discussed this, I don't think there really is a set number. You take as many as you can. It's such an important position, the O-line and the D-line, that you could, and with the transfer portal now, you could process kids out if they don't work out. I'm a big fan of Christopher Otto. After our conversation with him, I think he's a great kid. You look at the schools that I've offered. Forget the Power Fives, the Princetons, the Harvards. This tells me this kid's a very educated and very smart kid that could come in and learn a system. And offensive line, there's a lot of things that those guys have to learn mentally, just as much physically. And I think he won't struggle I think that the physical side can come along a lot quicker with his ability to think about stuff so quickly. So I really think that he should be in the class. He's one guy. I know they're going after DJ Chester. There's a couple other offensive linemen going after, one kid out of New Orleans that they've brought in a couple times. But I think you'll still see 3 or 4 offensive linemen in this class at the end of the day.
Okay, so at least 1 or 2 more. Ryan, do you agree with Fish's assessment of the offensive line group?
Yeah, 100%. The game is won in the trenches. Fish already said that. I would back that up completely. I think if one takes a step back, that's just a bigger college football fan in general. You look at the shortfall of Clemson the last couple of years. They haven't recruited the offensive line well. They don't have great offensive line play. When the Pac-12 gets on the national stage, they get pushed around up against SEC teams, and that's the size difference in the trenches. So for Florida State or any program to get big in the trenches and be able to have those guys come the fourth quarter that can get that key first down and run the ball out and kill the clock, that sort of stuff, that wins games. That takes, again, as Fish was saying, if the ceiling's 8, maybe if not this year, but next year, but you get into that 9-win plateau because you have an offensive line that can dominate the game and control it. So anything that they can do on a positive with the offensive line, 100% with that. With their other offensive line commit, or not offensive line commits, but offensive players commits, I like both of their receivers. They're both explosive. It's going to be exciting to see how they may fit into Florida State's offense and what they can do once on campus.
And you said receivers, right? Darren Lawrence and Von Travis Jacobs.
Jacobs, yeah.
Yep. Fish, I'd be interested in getting your thoughts on both Jacobs and Lawrence as well. Lawrence seems to be the speedster out of the two. He's listed as a 4.47 guy. And then obviously Jacobs is a highly productive guy. Watching his tape, competes for the ball very well, great concentration. But just get your thoughts on those two guys, Fish.
And the one thing with Jacobs, no matter whether it's in football pads or if he's at a camp, he's dominated at each level. And that's impressive to me, is that you want to see some people don't take 7-on-7 or football camp serious, but he's dominated that, especially at the Florida State camp in front of those coaches. The lights aren't too big for him. I think he's one of the top slot receivers. It's a great year for the state of Florida for receivers. I think there's going to be as many as 50, 60 guys going Division I this year. That's how deep and loaded the talent is. Jacobs in most years would probably be one of the top 2 slot receivers, but because it's so deep, he drops down a little bit. But I think he's the better of the two right now, just because they need a surefire playmaker. FSU needs a guy that could stretch the field. Lawrence has that ability. Some of the stuff I see on film does concern with me. It just because a kid runs a 4.4 or 4.5 doesn't always mean they get good separation. You know that as well as I do. That route running, some guys aren't 4.4 guys, but you watch them run routes, they look faster on a football field. Jacobs is that guy. When he gets in and out of his breaks, his ability to cut, he could get separation every time he puts his foot in the ground. And that, when you put that foot in the ground and you go the opposite way of the DB, you want to see that separation, and that's what Jacobs does. Lawrence is a little more, I don't feel he's as developed right now. He does have that talent. He gives FSU a bigger receiver. They have a lot of big receivers on their team, so I think Jacobs has a chance to honestly go in and play right away or earlier in the process. And I like him a little more than the Lawrence kid, to be honest.
To piggyback on that, Lawrence with his size and speed, I do agree he's a little raw, but he's somebody, again, at the end of this year, because he's kind of on that 4-star border. Right now it's just that kind of that freaky athlete, but that's somebody that could move up as a 4-star. With Jacobs, and I see this a lot, especially in Florida, there's guys that are those prototypical slot receivers. And I think if Jacobs is a true 5'11", the guys are a little bit smaller, that they'll break those ankles on defensive backs with their cuts and stuff like that. And he's that guy. It's always kind of interesting in today, in the modern era of college football, how slot receivers are perceived with the size. And I know Jacobs is kind of slight with his weight, and how that may be something once he's at the collegiate level. Do you know, Fish, is he really like in the 150, 160 range?
I mean, even if he is, I think the game's changed so much that since corners can't just physically beat up receivers anymore, and you've seen it at the college and the pro level, I'm not as concerned with his weight. He'll get up to 175, 180, be up in that 185 range. He'll be fine in once he gets in a college weight program. He is a little on the thin side. He's probably in that 160 range, but we've seen it so many times. I mean, I remember looking at Travis Benjamin in high school. I think he weighed 140, 150, and he played at a high level and made it to the league. The game's changed so much with DBs not being able to just come up and physically whip guys. It used to be a concern. You all had to worry about a guy getting bigger, going against bigger corners. But now that they're able to play in such space, I think it's almost an advantage sometimes that they're not too big. You want that, that guy that could move and be aggressive on the offensive side. So I'm not that concerned about his weight. He'll get bigger.
I got a question for both of you. It's a question I wrote. I just in my notes as I was watching the tape on Jacobs particularly. I had a question. My question was speed. My note was speed ? Have you guys seen him run in person? And Lawrence is listed as a 4.47 guy. What kind of breakaway speed does Jacobs have?
I can start. I think, and Fish kind of said this already when he started out, with the smaller guys that run those crispy routes, that's where they get their separation. So he's got that burst, in my opinion, he's got that burst and the quick cuts, fluid with his hips, and he can create those windows. A lot for me with the slot receivers, depending on their size, are they going to constantly have to line them up, a couple yards off of the line each play to help create that separation for smaller guys so they don't get pushed around when they come to the defensive backs or nickel back, whoever may be on them. But just taking Jacobs for who he is right now, super smooth, super explosive, the burst, the routes are there. Lawrence excites me. He's a little bit bigger. He is raw. He is an athlete. He does have good speed. But kind of like we were talking about with Lucas Simmons, I don't know that he would be as much of a project once he gets to college, just kind of fine tuning those routes. And if he's not getting that training now, and that is something that can come along in an off season if he comes in early or whatever. It can be, summertime by the fall, give him a couple of games, and he could be somebody that could contribute early for Florida State.
He kind of reminds me a little bit of Sam McCall when Sam played receiver in high school. I didn't like him as much as I like Sam, and I think Sam's probably one of those unique guys. Obviously, you can play both sides of the ball. But anyway, that's kind of who he reminded me of. Okay, the last commitment Florida State has on offense for right now, the latest commitment was running back Sam Singleton from Fleming Island, a guy that has good size, good speed, and seems to see the field very well with the ball in his hands. Always seems to naturally gravitate to green grass. Ryan, just your thoughts on Sam and his commitment to Florida State.
Yeah, I think he's somebody that's that versatile piece. For me, going the prototypical route, he's not as big. So that puts him in a scat back kind of role. If people are used to that terminology, I know you guys are. But somebody that can help out the backfield on passing downs, I don't know how strong of a blocker he would be picking up the blitz. So he may be kind of limited at the next level with some of the things that he can do, but just as an explosive playmaker, as you just said, Pat, he finds the green grass, get him in space. And he's somebody that if he makes someone miss, he can cover a lot of ground in a hurry.
Fish, what are your? I know we've talked a little bit about it, but what are your thoughts on?
I like Sam. I have three guys. There's three top guys, and then I have that second group. He's the top of that second group board. I like him. He reminds me a lot of Chris Thompson, and I know Chris wasn't 5'10". He was more like 5'8", 5'9". I'm just saying their running style. They both had that straight line speed. I like him because hopefully he brings the stretch run back to Florida State. I just think I really like the stretch when you could get a guy outside and get him in space. Sam's that guy. He's a one step and go. There's not going to be a lot of wiggle. He's not going to break down defenders and juke them out of their shoes. That's not his style. He's one cut and go like Chris was. And once he gets into the open field, he could take off and go the distance. And Florida State needs that. We've seen it. Norvell's proven, we've talked about this a lot. Norvell's proven that he could run the ball efficiently since he's been at FSU, but he hasn't had that one game breaker that at any time. I always go back to the Chris Thompson play against Miami. He had that big touchdown run. There was a penalty. They handed it right back to him, the stretch, bam, he scored again. He has that same type of ability. He brings that big play. FSU needs that. I think he could play right away at Florida State. I'm not saying as a starter, but I do think he could take some snaps away from other guys on the roster because he's that good.
Yeah, now I get Fish and I have talked about this, Ryan, but another kid that we like that's in that same area as another running back is Mike Mitchell from Middleburg. You got any thoughts on Michael?
I haven't looked over his film that much lately, so I'll pass off to you guys on that one. I would have to.
I'll take the lead on that. I mean, we both watched him. I don't think he's I have him rated a little lower than Singleton. I think he's a good player. Florida State needs backs, and I think they need a second back in the class. So I think he'll fit what they do. I'm not going to argue anything Willingham does at Utah as far as running backs. I always look at history of coaches and the guys they recruit. He's done a very good job in the state of Florida. He had Zach Moss. I think he had two running backs last year. One guy go over 1,000 yards. So his evaluations of running backs is very good. So if Whittingham likes him at Utah and FSU needs a second back, I say take the kid.
All right. Well, I like it too.
I will say one thing on that. So there's kind of the Wisconsin model that Bielema was doing when he was there, and then tried to do the same at Arkansas, and Whittingham does it with Utah, is get that South Florida tailback that is fast and can do things. And I think that plays well in the Big Ten when there's not as many athletes. Kind of in the Pac-12, they got a lot of good skill guys there. But I do think in the ACC, SEC, where you have all of these tremendous amount of athletes that are coming out of the South, it's a little bit different with these speedbacks, if you will, where I tend to like them if they have a little bit more size to them, because not only are they fast, but they can make a play for themselves. They can lower the shoulder pads and get a hit on somebody or maybe break a tackle, and the smaller guys just can't really do that. So that's my thing on some of the speedbacks that come out.
Well, I want to move on now to probably what is people have been waiting for us to talk about. Florida State does not have a quarterback committed to the 2023 class. Had Chris Parsons committed, he decommitted and committed to Mississippi State. Was thought to be in the thick of it with Brock Glenn from Memphis, and then Ohio State came in and offered Brock, and he has committed to them. Of course, it's not National Signing Day yet. I've learned that you never say never in recruiting, but Florida State did bring in Ryan Brown for Milford Academy in for Seminole Showcase, as well as Kason Weissman, who is now committed to Kansas from South Paulding, Georgia. Fish, where does Florida State go? they got to bring in a quarterback, you would think. I know they got Luke Komarek coming in 2024, but that's still a year away.
You know my belief. You got to bring one quarterback at least in every year. And I know Florida State, talking to one of my sources, they said they want two. So I don't know if that's a high school kid and a transfer kid, but I think they're going to have two come in. I see one of the quarterbacks. If Jordan leaves, I could still see one of the other two deciding with the transfer portal they want to enter it. So I do think they need to bring in two. I'm a big fan of Emory Williams. I know he's committed to Miami. I know FSU's been like a little lukewarm on him. He's down the street from him. He has all the tools. I don't think he's a bad quarterback to have in their class. And, Miami already has another quarterback committed. I think he'd be a great addition. I saw something out there today. I don't know how true it is. Ryan could probably expand on it a little bit. Avery Johnson, who's committed to Kansas State, is starting to, I guess Florida State's trying to go back to him. He did come to their camp 2 years ago. I watched him. I mean, I was impressed with them at their summer camp. I think he'd be a great get. You never can have enough quarterbacks. I'm of the belief Ron Wolf. I always look back at the Ron Wolf model with the Green Bay Packers, and every year he would draft quarterbacks, even in the 6th or 7th round, because of the value that if they had a good training camp, you could always get a higher pick later on. And I think quarterbacks, even at the college level, I've seen it even at my son's level, at the Pop Warner level, you need quarterbacks. You don't want to get in a position where you don't have one because you're not going to win. I don't care how good the rest of your team is. If you don't have a quarterback that could get the ball and get the play, it's the most important position on the field. They need to bring one in. Like I said, I'd like to get Emory Williams. You talked about Brock Glenn. I think he decided at that point when he committed that Ohio State looks like the better program. Of course, they are the better program right now. But if Florida State shows something, and you don't know, like Ohio State may have a great season, all of a sudden somebody that they like more, they're on, and Florida State had recruited Brock. Maybe Brock decides on National Signing Day or close to it, hey, let me switch my commitment. So you never go off of that. I don't think you can take that stuff personally as personal. If you're a coach, you recruit guys till the end. If you think you have a shot, they need to bring in a quarterback. I think it's must. And like I said, from my understanding, they want to bring in two. So that means they're going to bring in at least one high school and one transfer this year.
Shoot, now with the transfer portal, you got to recruit them after they've enrolled in college. It's like a 7-year process now. Ryan, what are your thoughts on the quarterback prospects and what Florida State needs to do for this particular class at the signal caller position?
Another thing that I'm hearing with Emory Williams that might be in play, watch out for Auburn there. I'm not sure how solid that is. I don't know that Florida State's recruiting him, but a guy in state that I think starting to get a lot of attention behind the scenes is from IMG Academy, Parker Lisi. So it's kind of interesting. He's from Kansas originally, was very interested in Kansas State. Avery was the take for them. But he's not on their national team. He's on their varsity team and had a great spring game. A lot of offensive coordinators were there for the spring game. He threw really well. Maybe that's something that they look at, later on, because right now he doesn't have a ton of offers, but that could be an in-state kid that they get. And he is very talented. He's one of those guys that does everything well. And it may not be something where, he's got a top flight Sunday arm or something like that, but he's just really solid across the board. So that might be something to look at.
Well, let me ask both of you this. You've both been following high school football for a long time, high school recruiting. It seems like for the last, I don't know, probably more than 10 years, but it seems like around 10 years, about the time I left South Florida, everyone started getting almost a year ahead in recruiting, right? I mean, the early signing period, Florida State's 14 commitments into it. A lot of these programs are almost full, and we haven't even got to the start of the 2022 football season. In particular, as it pertains to quarterbacks, how often do you see a guy at the high school level that blossoms as a senior? Fish, is there anybody you see in the state of Florida that might, be a guy that comes on the recruiting scene as a senior year guy at quarterback?
I mean, it hasn't happened yet. I think there is a kid that's committed to UMass from Palm Beach Central, this Ahmad Haston kid, I think his name is. He, after meeting him at media day, I came away very impressed. I think he has like a 5.0 GPA. He's about 6'2", 6'3". I think he's a kid that if he has a great year, you could start to see some of the Power 5 schools, and then maybe even a Florida State take a look. See, he has the size. He comes from a football family. I met some people that know his family, and I've heard nothing but great things. So he's a kid that I could see the Hasten kid, something happening with him. So there's always guys in the state of Florida that have runs. I mean, last year, listen, Ryan Brown was not real well known. He did have a very good state championship run, and I think that's helped him get the interest that he's had early on this year. And if he puts together another good year in prep school, he'll probably blow up. And listen, quarterbacks have a lot of value. So if somebody needs one, you see it all the time. I mean, you look at Kyle Trask when he went to Florida, he was a second string quarterback in high school. And he went, and Florida took a chance on him. So guys do find their way on rosters and develop and end up pretty good. I had spoken to the offensive coordinator, Yost, at FIU, and I asked him, why do some guys have so much success recruiting quarterbacks? And he thinks that a lot overlook that senior year, that senior year of high school is so important, that if you look at the stats, guys that have high winning percentages, high completion percentages, that those senior quarterback stats mean a lot more than some of the guys that get recruited early on.
All right. Well, you mentioned the word value, and one of the questions I had for both you and Ryan, I'll let you start with this because Lord knows we are going over our allotted time. But how has the implementation of the NIL affected commitments, and maybe what is the biggest change you've seen in recruiting because of that? And I guess my question on the NIL, has that made commitments any more stable because there's now essentially a contract involved?
I think the NIL process behind the scenes, what we don't know about, makes fools of us all. Because we don't know. I mean, maybe we hear that X player was offered 70 or 75,000, or I guess in some cases millions. But so I do believe that what we saw June and July, with everything being so crazy, all of these kids committing, that there's going to be certain teams that are coming down to the stretch run, don't like the class that they have, and then they go to the donors or the collectives or whatever the case may be, and all of a sudden kids are starting to flip. So I think it plays a very big factor in recruiting. I don't think that we're done. Even if different teams feel really solid, we've already seen players flip. Keon Keeley out of Notre Dame. Notre Dame's a very good program. Dijon Johnson from Ohio State, very good program. I think Georgia's taken a couple out of Penn State. So it's going to continue to happen. To what level, I do think it's going to be kind of high. So it is important. I think the subset with a lot of that still is going to be development, fit, culture, depth chart, that sort of stuff. But it's going to play a factor. And if there's just one difference between, two different schools, not just Florida State or whoever, but if it's a $20,000 difference, that could be the difference maker for one lucky school.
Fish, you still with us? All right. Well, Ryan, I'll ask another.
I'm here.
Go ahead, Fish. You get.
No, I was just saying with the whole NIL deal. I think it's going to work itself out. The money isn't as crazy as people think. I spoke to one general manager of one of the college football programs. He's like, Fish, the numbers aren't even close to what people are saying we're paying. There'll be money pushed around, but I'm not really worried about it. I think it will work itself out at that. So.
All right. Well, I got this. Obviously, you guys are follow a lot of schools' recruiting processes nationally and regionally, and we talked a little bit about this before we started taping. What program has surprised you guys the most to this point with their 2023 recruiting class? I would ask that from both a positive standpoint and a negative standpoint. Ryan, I'll let you start.
Yeah, I think from the positive, look at what Northwestern's done. They jumped out ahead early, had 20, I think they're at 20 commitments or something like that. At one point in the summer, they were in the top 10. We didn't expect them to stay up there because they had so many kids early. That's why they had the high ranking, and they're going to drop. And I think they're maybe at number 21 right now. They could end up at number 30, but traditionally they're down in the 60s and stuff like that. So going back to NIL, I do wonder, being in Chicago with a lot of money around the Northwestern program, if that might be a sign of things to change for Northwestern and their ability to compete in the Big Ten, maybe getting more kids there. And it's going to be interesting seeing them go up against Wisconsin and even maybe Notre Dame for some of those kids in the region. So they would be a positive. On the negative, it's got to be Texas A&M. And it doesn't mean that they're not going to end up at a high level when all is said and done. But coming off of one of the best recruiting classes ever in the 2022 class, to see them, I think they're around number 40 or something. They've crept up. They've had a better August. But to see them lagging behind everybody else in the SEC, and the one thing that Jimbo Fisher or whoever really can't say anything against is Texas last year had the number 5 ranked recruiting class, and they're in top 5 again this year. So they're going head to head in the Lone Star State. Alabama is doing really well. They got to keep up with those two teams. They're competing against Oklahoma. LSU is doing really well. So I am surprised to see them so far down the rankings. Those would be my two, positive and negative.
Fish, who you got?
Louisville. I mean, here's a coach at Satterfield. I think everybody in the state of Kentucky, Louisville, and Kentucky want to get rid of, if you read their message boards, what they've done. I mean, they got the Reuben Owens kid, who's like the top running back, one of them in the country. And then in the state of Florida, they've done very well. Stan Quad Clark, who's had interest from both Florida State and Miami, he's committed. You look at some of the other guys, they're about to pull possibly the Robbie and Bobby Washington, the two twins from who were at Killian. Their father played at Miami. They're now at Palmetto. Both of them are seriously considering the Louisville Cardinals. They're about to do some serious damage in the state of Florida this year, and that's impressive considering where their coach is sitting on that hot seat and where their program was ending last year. So Louisville's my surprise team as far as recruiting.
Ryan, we look forward to having you on a regular basis. Appreciate you taking the time. We know you're very busy, and of course, Fish, always enjoy our conversations and look forward to catching up with you guys next week on our Reeling Them In recruiting report. Thanks for joining us, and we'll see you guys again next week.
Thanks, guys.
Thanks.